starting hour number 2. Jamming with you today, having some fun with you today, having some serious time with you today. I'm Gary Sutton. This is the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. 1-800-357-0910. Questions welcome at any time. You can also email me at gary.sutton@cumulus.com. Get on Twitter at Gary G. Sutton, and also Facebook.com/910WSBA. And short of stopping in and seeing me, which I'm going to be talking about later on, some of you are going to be doing that too. It's a great way to get hold of me during the day. I read an article the other day called Cult of the Blameless Black, and it was an interesting article. You know, these are the subjects you're never supposed to talk about on radio unless you really care about solving some of the problems in this country, which a lot of radio hosts don't want to do. We're in search of common sense and truth every day. So these are the things you need to talk about. With us this morning is Nadra Enzi, who wrote this piece called The Blameless Black. He's a new Project 21 Black Leadership Network member, and he's with us here this morning on the Morning News on the Gary Sutton Show. Good morning, Nadra. Great to have you aboard. I'm honored to have you in.
My pleasure.
Now, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started this, because just to say you're a new Project 21 member makes it sound like you're a kid coming in off the street there, and that's not the case at all. You've been around for a while, right?
Yes, I have. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, home of Justice Clarence Thomas, and when crack hit my neighborhood, I realized that philosophy and poetry were going to have to take a back seat to the civil right of safety.
Wow.
And as things devolved in the community, we find that safety has now become, I think, the 21st century civil rights movement.
Now, am I correct? You go under the name AKA Captain Black, right?
That's correct. Captain Black, the hood conservative.
There you go. And one of the things that I read here that you said, and it just hit me. It was just so starkly common sense. Crime isn't a civil right. What a great statement. Crime isn't a civil right. We get the impression, and we do a lot of stereotyping today, that somehow it's okay, but it's not. So you happen to be a black man, I happen to be a white man, but I think the thing we have in common, first of all, we're Americans. First of all, we're people.
Precisely.
And also, I think we want to solve some of the problems out there that some people want to give a pass to, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And let me take this time to just give my condolences to the greatest conservative that I knew, the Honorable Floyd Adams Jr., who was the mayor of Savannah. He was the first black mayor, but he would always tell people that he's the mayor of all Savannah. We have to unite around some basics.
You know,
young men. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, you wrote in this piece, The Cult of the Blameless Black, and by the way, if you don't get a chance to read that, please get out there, frontlines2011.blogspot.com, and then you go /2013-12. Nadra-Enzi. And if you just want to Google Nadra Enzi, you'll find that anywhere. So I'm going to give you a lot of pub here before we let you kind of just cut you loose there, okay, Nadra?
Not a problem, but the article was inspired by the fact that some people, and I call them pro-crime blacks, because they feel that we can use history, or what I call the remote control theory, that for every headline you see with a young black suspect, that somehow behind a tree with a remote control is a white person somehow who's more responsible. We have allowed a segment in the community to just undermine personal responsibility, to lower community standards to subterranean depths and say, hey, it's all right to commit crime. You can't talk about it. You can't, like the knockout game, if someone talks about it, if you talk about it, it's right-wing propaganda. You know, if I talk about it, I must be in denial. But here's the unpleasant reality. I became an anti-crime activist not because of the Tea Party, not because of the GOP, not because of the Ku Klux Klan, but because young men, and I use the term loosely, with pants hanging off their behinds, pistols in one hand, crack in the others, were making life in zip codes like mine unlivable.
One of the things that you did in this article is you started to lay out the origins for where this kind of came from, in your opinion, and I thought you hit it right on. I was a history teacher for about 25 years before I got into this business, and I was sitting there thinking about the things that you were saying there, and I want you to lay those out for people, because I think you've really put your finger on something.
In the 1960s, please note that most civil rights activists were fighting for peaceful constitutional reform. When the wave of assassinations hit, culminating with Dr. King's assassination, suddenly you have all this rioting. Please note that the rioting took place in the same low-income communities that Dr. King and many of the others represented. Please also note that there was a feature of free wealth redistribution in the form of looting. Some people took this as a cue to say, well, hey, whenever we don't get what we want, we'll just start to destroy things. But you only destroy your community. So that dynamic started. Another flashpoint for this dynamic, of course, was the riots that resulted, or the so-called uprisings that the pro-crime activists call it, in the wake of the Rodney King verdict, when the first jury in Simi Valley acquitted the police officers. Once again, what did we see? Wanton violence in the inner city, and as an added bonus, looting. Now, what does a big screen TV have to do with your being angry about alleged police brutality?
Right.
Fast forward to 2005. Some say in the wake of the levee breach here in New Orleans, where I'm speaking, because I live in New Orleans now. What did the looting, sometimes even by members of the New Orleans Police Department, sadly enough, of cars from dealerships, big screen TVs, sneakers, what did this have to do with people who were supposedly in danger, in fear for their lives because they were starving? There was a lot of starving, there was a lot of desperation, but there was also, regrettably, a lot of looting. And these are like the macro examples. The micro example you see on your evening news every day. And no civil rights leader, again, in big quotes, will get up and denounce this behavior and saying that crime and looting are not the vehicles for addressing injustice. You know, we didn't see Dr. King, and we can even go to the other end of the spectrum. We did not see Malcolm X saying, twerk your way, rob your way, shoot your way to freedom.
Yeah. I was around during that time, and obviously very interested in what they had to say, and I was always impressed with Dr. King, who was fighting against real injustices in this country and putting himself out there, you know, leading the crowd doing it. When he always talked about man, he was talking about, you know, getting equality, the content of character, not the color of skin, all that stuff that we've heard a million times, and yet I don't know if it's sunk in. And he wasn't talking about the use of victimhood either. He was talking about the dignity of man, wasn't he?
Precisely. I mean, the Ten Commandments, the Constitution. It's amazing. People from that era, even the far left radicals, what did they keep talking about? The Constitution. Most of them knew the Constitution better then than many of our so-called activists know now. And we have to focus on the fact that it's about individual rights. It all boils down to the individual. And you have to be accountable for your actions. I have to be accountable for mine. If we start making exemptions based on pigmentation, then we're taking a giant step backward.
Nadra,
chaos. Go ahead.
I could play softball questions with you. You don't seem like the kind of person that wants to do softball, so we'll play hardball. And I'm interested in how, when we study these things, we get right to some blunt answers. And one of the things that we've seen today is, and people say, well, this is just a stereotype, but I don't think it is. The numbers bear it out. The disintegration of the black family today, the male-less black family and the mother raising the child, where's that come from? Is that all tied into this at all somewhere?
When you tie your horse to socialist policy and you have no resources, Jane Fonda had money. I know you know Jane Fonda.
Yeah, we do. Yes, we do.
The hippies, once they took a bath and cut their hair, there was a place for them in the economy. All of these anti-family, anti-father initiatives of theirs had only one result in the black community: chaos. 76% of black children are born in single-parent households. The fact that the government has become the de facto father in many of our households has not led to some sort of workers' paradise. What it's led to, particularly after the advent of crack, is now you have this bizarre society where teenagers with guns and drugs have become the role models. And too often, because drug addiction is so pandemic in the inner city, men who would otherwise be serving as their mentors are now running behind them trying to get a hit.
The other part of this, and you write about this in this piece, is you said unbeknownst to cultists, all they've done is light a smoldering fire of resentment among otherwise amiable white people who thought such naked racial violence was a thing of the past.
I mean, think about it. Now, I'm 47 years old. When I grew up, the concept, you would have to put a gun to our heads to say, walk outside in public with your pants hanging off your behind.
Right.
Rob, rape, and kill people, and then want to blame everybody else for it. No, we were trying to be the best that we could be. And fast forward to 2014, and I lay it out to people. If you are a white American and you don't know a lot of black people personally, if you turn on your television set, you see the 6 o'clock news, you say, wow, look at this crime. Then you ask yourself, well, I know somebody's speaking out against it. And if all you see are well-paid enablers for criminal activity who never denounce it but want to blame you in your living room for what other people are freely choosing to do, that can generate resentment.
Which now takes it over to how the blameless black, and I always hate that when people say the blameless black. I mean, we treat it like the black culture, like you all walk around with hands on each other's shoulders in front like a bunch of sled dogs.
Yeah.
I think
lemmings.
Lemmings. Thank you. It's got to be horrible to be thought about that way. But the point is here, when all you see or hear about are maybe the irresponsible people out there, and then all of a sudden they say, "Well, that must be you too, Nadra." I mean, you can't.
It's very easy.
Yeah, you mean, and then you get into some real stereotyping that's really wrong.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I said that the cult of the blameless black unintentionally reinforces the old stereotypes, and it creates new ones because, once again, when all people see in media headlines are criminal suspects, they all look black.
Yeah.
Then you have spokespersons, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, whomever, who never speak out against black crime. Then you have unpopular media in the form of rap music and videos glorifying violence and behavior that makes Birth of a Nation pale by comparison. And if anybody doesn't know what Birth of a Nation is, Google it. You're in for a real treat.
Yeah.
You mix all this together and bring it to a simmer, and what you have is a very unflattering image of a group of people that is not being contested. I'm not the only one out here doing this, and there's a growing movement of us who are saying that, look, the criminal identity is not the authentic black identity, but we're not the ones who occupy the centers of power. Regrettably, we're not the ones who control the civil rights organizations. We're not the ones who are the big spokespersons. But this counterculture of character, of personal responsibility, of fighting crime as a civil right is growing. So that's the good part.
Yep. We're going to take a quick break. Can you stick with us for another 5 minutes, Nadra?
I definitely can.
An honor talking to you. We're going to come right back here. Nadra Enzi, who's written this article, and I'll tell you what, Google his name. It's Nadra Enzi. He's a member of Project 21 Black Leadership Network. The Cult of the Blameless Black. It might be one of the more introspective pieces that I've read in a long time, and I think he explains it well. He'll come back and explain more in person here on The Gary Sutton Show. Welcome back to The Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. An intriguing interview right there now with Nadra Enzi, who has written a piece called The Cult of the Blameless Black, and talking about black people in this country. And, again, well, I'll tell you what, the day will come, and Nadra rejoins us this morning. Nadra, the day will come when we walk down the street and we walk by someone and we don't, and I think a lot of people are there. I really do. Maybe I'm naive, and you can tell me if I am. A lot of people are at a point where you walk down the street and you see somebody and you say hello to them. Oh, yeah, they happen to have black skin, they happen to have white skin or yellow. But that doesn't really figure into our thinking, does it? In a lot of, I hope most cases in this country, maybe I'm wrong.
I would say that we have made significant inroads toward that perception. But, this is the whole reason why I wrote this particular piece. If you are not willing to say that a chocolate Klansman, which is one of my nicknames, Black Thugs, is as reprehensible as any other type of Klansman, then you start the growing resentment I alluded to and the mistrust, because people are like, well, wait a minute. All this crime, all this violence, whenever one of us does it, it gets on national news.
Right.
whenever one of them, meaning black people, does it, where is the outrage? Where is the outcry? Bill O'Reilly, for instance, should get the NAACP's highest award because he has been beating the drum about black-on-black crime, fatherlessness, the decline of the family unit. These are the issues we need to talk about. And I always throw this tone setter out. It's not beating up on black people, because my words cannot be beating up on the community any more than these horrible headlines we see on a daily basis. The thug is not the state of the art of our development. We need to be honest about that, and we need to tell him that he no longer has cultural safe passage in the community. I came from a neighborhood where little old ladies who survived Jim Crow, the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, were hiding inside of their houses behind burglar bars and big steel security doors, and they weren't doing it because they feared that the local county Republican Party was going to run through there, randomly shooting people.
Right.
No. You see, safety is a civil right. This is what we have to fight for. This is what we have to unite for over as Americans. But we have to be honest. And the honest issue is 96% of black males are killed by who? Other black males. The leading cause of homicide among black men, leading cause of mortality, for black men 14 to 25 is homicide. That is totally controllable. But it can only be controlled if we're honest about the problem.
Where did so many of these black men that you're talking about right now, who are the pants hanging to the ground, all that kind of stuff, get the idea that the American dream isn't the same for them as it is, let's say, for a white kid the same age? Where did we part ways on that?
We were doing pretty well in the 1980s, and then once crack hit, I can, again, always reference back to my neighborhood. We went from the Cosby Show, which I think a lot of your listeners remember.
Right.
Middle-class black families, to Boys in the Hood, which is this bleak landscape of fatherless young men enforcing drug turf with high-caliber weapons. And that happened in roughly 10 years.
Wow. And it's amazing when you look at that, because you're right. There was a split, I think, where a lot of us are looking for that. It seems today that from our politicians and from our popular culture that we want to somehow now justify that is okay, that's the face. I'm reminded of, and it was, everybody damned this whole thing that happened out at in Arizona the other week at this fraternity where they were doing these stereotypes, and yet. Isn't that kind of the stereotype that's drawn by the actions of those people? I'm not saying what they did was right. It certainly wasn't. But point being, don't we get around to, here you are out there just as I am, trying to be a responsible citizen, and yet you have someone dragging you back in there and saying, no, here's who you really are. This is what you're really a part of.
I mean, think about it. You've seen Lil Wayne, for instance.
Right.
Okay. Most black folks from my generation and preceding generations, you would have had to execute us before we would step out in public.
Yeah.
And looking like that and saying and doing the things, there's a loss of shame, there's a loss of individual pride, there's a loss of dignity, and also prison culture, because this whole pants-sagging thing came from
prison,
the jailhouse.
Yeah.
Again, here are some painful truths that when you condition people to act like convicts, to admire convicts, and guess what? Obviously, a percentage are going to act like and emulate and eventually become convicts. And this is my whole battle, that we have to save the culture, because the culture predicates the realities that we find in the inner city. And the culture right now glorifies violence, glorifies vulgarity, glorifies every type of behavior that people once stereotyped us as being. Now you've got young people who loudly, proudly exhibit these behaviors in public. They don't even have the shame to keep it private. You can walk down your downtown area. You can go to, quote, the other side of the tracks, wherever any of your listeners may live, and you see it on display. It's not a Tea Party propaganda campaign. It's a lifestyle that people have chosen that is destroying literally everyone around them, sometimes including themselves.
We have about a minute and a half left. Where do we go? What do we do? How do we as a society, black, white, yellow, purple, polka dot, whatever, get together and go after this?
The same way we united in the 1960s is the same way we have to unite now and say unequivocally that certain behaviors that lead to violence, that lead to illiteracy, that lead to the type of cultural destruction on display in the black community, and increasingly, if you read Charles Murray's book, The Coming White Underclass, in mainstream America, we have to unite and say this is not acceptable. And we use forums like yours, organizations like Project 21, organizations like the Home Defense Foundation of New Orleans, which I'm a coordinator of, and we form a solid front that says we will not accept this.
And just as we have a constant chorus of this kind of stuff out there trying to beg us to make it legit, you have to have a constant chorus on the other end of the thing saying, no. This isn't acceptable to any citizen in this country, period.
When Pat Buchanan said at the Republican National Convention that there was a culture war, he could have just as easily been my friend Walter Gildersleeve in Detroit, who has Detroit Street Watchers fighting the culture war there. And men all over the country, some Republican, some Democrat, but all grounded in traditional values, who said that, we refuse to have communities where people are not safe. We refuse to have a culture where violence and vulgarity are exalted. It's just that simple.
Nadra, it has been an honor having you in this morning. Thank you so much for a great conversation. We're going to put this up on our website, by the way, at facebook.com/910WSBA. Again, check it out there. Nadra Enzi, Cult of the Blameless Black. Nadra, it will be a very soon time coming forward. We'll speak again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Take care. Nadra Enzi with us here on the Morning News.